morning, guys. It's George from the Northford Timber Framers, and I'm here to talk about our timber frame class of 2020, which is coming up the third week in April. You can find it on our website, which will be connected to this video on YouTube. But I wanted to show off the location to where our class project is going to happen this year. And actually, we're on North Street in North Branford, Connecticut. And it's a special sort of a lost community here where they actually closed off this road back in the 30s, and they built a reservoir behind me here up on top of the mountain. And so they closed this road off and made it a dead end around the Depression. And what happened was they actually flooded around 20 farms, barns, homes, all the machinery. Everything is at the bottom of the reservoir. And our town history book will explain that during droughts of the last century, you could still see the chimneys from the homes sticking up through the lake when we would have a dry summer. But anyway, I'm standing in front of the Reverend Samuel Eels' house. And Samuel Eels was a preacher. He was the minister at the Congregational Church, which is a few hundred feet that way. So the class project of 2020 will be built right about where that tractor is. And it's a 4-bent structure with 4 queen bents upstairs, which will be made of cherry. And the property actually is 10 acres. It's like its own little private path. It goes up, it's quite a nature trail that winds up through the woods there. But specifically, this morning we're going to show off the Reverend Samuel Eels' house. I thought I would start down here by the road where this carriage stone is. And this is a typical New England carriage stone that would have been used for a carriage. A horse and buggy would come alongside of this. And of course, imagine the ladies who were going to go to town or go to church. They'd have to get up in the carriage in their dresses. And so what they would do is they would get helped up the carriage stone and then step into the carriage. So this is the original carriage stone from when the house was built back in the 1750s. Now, the most interesting part about this house and this history that we're standing in the midst of is that during a sermon in January of 1777, a courier interrupted the Sunday service which Reverend Samuel Eels was giving. And it was a courier who had come up from New York under George Washington's orders to get volunteers to go back to Manhattan and help defend the city. And before the sermon was over, Samuel Eels had enlisted 60 men, where they gathered on the town green, and off to New York they went by the end of the day to be a part of the rebellion or the glorious cause. So it's rich, very rich in early American history here, with the presence of our founding fathers, and specifically where orders from George Washington came for help. So I'd like to take you up inside the house, and we'll look at some of the special features of this 270-year-old home. So the house is currently undergoing a renovation/restoration. The house was in very, very, very poor condition. And fortunately for the house and history, the gentleman that purchased the house is doing a marvelous job. And unfortunately, there were many, many, many timbers that had to be replaced inside. Most of the first floor joists, most of the sills, the siding had to be replaced. The studs were rotting in most of this side of the house. The windows were replaced to match the original 12/12 windows, which we still have. You'll notice the large front door, which made it easy to get a coffin in and out of. The house has an incredible presence. Now, this timber frame inside of this house is white oak. It's an English home. The timbers are huge. It's a very early scribe rule frame. So this frame was built by Englishmen as they landed here in Connecticut and used the same square rule timber frame layout system that they were using in England. And when we get inside and you see the timbers, you're going to flip. So that's a good view of the outside. I thought we'd take a walk down the basement now and show off the fireplace footing down there. Hi you guys, so we're down in the basement, and actually I'm down underneath the chimney. So up on top of this giant stone archway, which we'll walk around in the basement and show you. This is physically the footing for the stone fireplace, which goes from this level here up someplace around 34 feet, all the way up through the attic, and we'll end up there. But I just wanted to show you how dramatic this is. This is at least 12 foot inside here, and let's walk around downstairs, the basement here, and let's show this off a little bit. You want to go this way because it's easier?
Sure.
So we wanted to just give you guys an idea as to what the basement looked like down here, and how big the footing was for the fireplaces. I mean, you guys, look at the size of this. It's such rich architectural history. It is so cool. Now, 20 years ago, I was in this house, and I came around just the way we're coming. And what I want you guys to notice is, look at how this stone right here changes. I have a suspicion that this was some sort of a secret, either an entrance or an exit. We're unable to determine if this is something that's fossilized or if it's an early form of concrete. Nobody can really figure out if this isn't something that's petrified or if it's actually a rock that we're not recognizing. But we don't know why it was there. It seems to me to be there by choice, as if there was a tunnelway here, and at some point they used this to cover it, and it's a mixture of other masonry type products. Here's the back side to this chimney. And also you'll notice these floor joists. We had to replace all these floor joists in the whole downstairs, including the whole sill. The whole sill on the house was replaced in 8 and 10 foot sections. Now, this house was saved just in time. Another 3 or 4 or 5 years, and I have no doubt that it would have been demolished. And talk about losing a rich piece of American history. Now, remember, you guys, this was built 270 years ago, sometime around 2050 or 2056. I'm not going to be here, but this house is going to celebrate its 300th year anniversary, and the class project of 2020 is going to be sitting out in the backyard here. Let's have a look upstairs, you guys. Coming in. So this is the back entrance, and you're actually coming into what's the kitchen. And we just had two very skilled masons go through and repoint in here, repoint up there. There's a wonderful, wonderful cooking oven here, which is very deep. And it's so cool to see this archway, this hand-chiseled stone that created that beehive oven like that. This is original. We actually had to remove this. You can still see the charred mark. It was lower for its first 270 years, but we chose to move it up a little bit and keep it away from the heat. But it actually was closer to the fire, as is evidenced by how dark it is. Now you can see all the hand plastering that was done here. All of these notches that are in the studding on the inside that you'll notice is for the plaster to stick to. And imagine the time it took to make all those little notches, those little grooves with a hand chisel or some sort of an adze. So we're coming around the corner to another room over here, which we could say would have been the dining room. And we notice there's another fireplace here. The fireplaces are all Rumford fireplaces. They have a very shallow, narrow hearth, and then they taper on the back drastically, and the sides taper up to create a different smoke shelf. And it's why it's called the Rumford Fireplace. It was designed by an English gentleman whose name was Count Rumford in the 18th century. Now, this next surprise is the best of all. So this is the front doorway, and you guys, you have to see this. Look at the bread oven that's actually in the front doorway. This is incredible. It's the front door right here behind us. When you walk in the front door, this is what you see. Can you imagine this house being destroyed, you guys? Can you imagine if we weren't taking the time to do this, to restore this house and save this home? This is the front foyer with the double front doors, with an Indian brace or an Indian lock, as you would call it. You know, that's simply how the door was kept closed. But a coffin would come in and out of here pretty easy. So we're coming into what would have been a parlor, and there's a built-in corner cupboard. Again, almost 300 years old. Now, I got to see the back side of that when we had ripped the siding off the outside of it, and there were all hand plane marks. And I assure you, I looked for a set of initials or a date, which I continue to do as we do work on this house. Now, there's a ton of writing in the attic, mathematic equations. So it would have been quite common for the mom to give class or hold a school seasonally up in the attic when it was not too hot or not too cold. And the mothers in the neighborhood would have actually taken turns teaching the children when there wasn't a local school to go to. And I only know that because of all the arithmetic lessons and all the writing lessons that I've seen in, I don't know, someplace 50 or 60 18th century homes that I've been involved with for my 45-year career. It's amazing. You see all this writing in the attic and you wonder, why would somebody have been up there? It's because they held a class up there. Let's go up to the second floor, you guys. So here we are coming up the stairs to the second floor. And the first thing that immediately strikes you is the size of this timber. My guess is it's someplace around 12 or 13 inches with a vertical height. Again, the original stone foundation, which we just had touched up, there was so many loose stones in it, it looked like it was not safe. So the masons really did a good service. Hey, come on the back side over here, and once again look at this summer beam. Look how it disappears behind the chimney. But look at the size of it, you guys. And if we look at this timber here, we'll notice that it's a gun stock, much like my shop at home. You see how it comes up and then goes into, it gets wider at the end, like the butt end of a gun stock. And here's the coolest thing of all. There's a tenon. The reason it's gun stocked, one of the reasons, there's a tenon that's from the ruling side, it's 2 for 2. So there's a tenon parallel with the plate. And then if we come over here, there'll be a tenon that's parallel with this summer beam this way. So if I'm making sense to you, the tenons are perpendicular to each other in this white oak gunstock timber. This is the coolest timber framing that we could expose ourselves to. I don't care where we want to go in our country. I don't care where we want to go in England. It doesn't get much better than this with these huge, mammoth, hand-hewn white oak timbers that were installed here in North Branford, Connecticut, nearly 300 years ago. And remember my introduction this morning about this being the Reverend Samuel Eels' house. And remember the courier who came to church that morning, January 1777, which was less than a month after Washington crossed the Delaware River. And they had 60 men sign up to go back to New York and participate in the Revolution. Let's come into the front bedroom in here. Literally goes right out the roof. This is the coolest fireplace.
Shine that up there again. Cool. Neat.
Isn't it neat? So this fireplace here, this wall, before we started this restoration, this wall came down and it covered this fireplace. So this fireplace was inside the wall here, as best we can tell, for the last 100 years. But when we gutted the backside over here to expose the stonework, we wanted the stonework to show indoors as much as it could. From the side, we could tell that there was some sort of a mantle here. And so we started to investigate and literally found this fireplace in the wall. This corner over here, this is another incredible example of a huge gunstock timber where there's an intersection of, look at the size of this, you guys. So that's an outer girt that's intersecting a front plate, and that's a corner post. And once again, it's at least a foot with two tendons in each one of those haunches that are perpendicular to each other. And I want to tell you, that's a tricky tendon to make by hand. Let's come over into the front, the second floor of the front hallway. And excuse the Christmas tree, but if you look here, you're going to see another fireplace here on the second floor. And then, so as not to disappoint you, we actually have what would be the last fireplace, which it's plain to see that it's a Rumford fireplace. If you notice how narrow the firebox is and how it slants from the backwards, forwards, and the two sides are angled and then pitched that way. So a Rumford fireplace. Wonderful wide boards here. Very curious that the floorboards are going two different ways. There's more mysteries than not the more we look here. So let's take a trip up to the attic and finish our tour up there. So we're up in the attic, you guys, and I wanted to show you a couple things. First of all, here's a beautiful race knife mark, which was made by a tool that's called a race knife. You see how these correspond? This identifies this dovetailed truss as it's dovetailed into a principal rafter. And of course, a hand white oak peg. But see the scribing system? Now let's move one rafter down and you'll see that there's also, the scribe mark here might be kind of hard to see. It's right up there and it's right here. And then I think this next one is nice and easy to see. Look at this one, you guys. Look, it's an upside down, what we would think was a 5 and 3 slashes. So 8, 9, and the first one we looked at was a 10. And then here we go again with a 7. So it's an upside down V, which is meant to be 5, 6, 7. And then here you see the truss itself, or the collar tie, if you will, where it's dovetailed in, has the corresponding. So the idea with the race knife marks is that that joint would have been fit up on the ground. And then they had to take it apart to get this up in place where they had to reassemble it. Now, you only had to do the race knife marks on one end. So there's no race knife marks over on this other end because you only had to mark one side. And also, this face here would be the ruling face. So there's two ruling sides, two key sides, two ruling sides. Like the king was a ruler. There's two ruling sides to every beam, to every timber in a timber frame. The two ruling sides of this principal rafter are the top and this face. Does that make sense? Anything that's horizontal, like a floor joist or a rafter or a girt or a top plate, the side that faces heaven is one ruling side. The second ruling side is left for the timber framer to choose the best of the remaining 3 sides. And that matches the framing square. And that's why we call the later part of timber framing around the turn of the century, which would be around 1810, that's why we call it square rule. Anyway, you guys, a quick lesson, a little bit about scribe rule. And this attic is magnificent. There is thousands of board feet of white oak in these rafters here, all hand hewn and all in pristine condition. So I'm actually standing in the area where the barn is going to go. The barn is 30 foot this way, as you'll see by these markers, and the barn is 40 foot going this way. And here's a good shot of the house. And when you see this a year from now, you won't believe how that house looks. And I appreciate your attention today, and I hope you enjoyed this video of the Samuel Eels house, circa 1755, 1760. And I hope you'll join us at class this year. Class is filling up, the Northford Timber Frame Class of 2020. So now's a good time to sign up. Hey, we'll see you around on YouTube. Thank you.